Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. How's it going?
Tony, we have the 4th of July in the rearview mirror now. And as soon as that happens, it feels like we're not in season mode, but we're like limbering up to be in season mode because we are now, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be in Las Vegas for Big Ten Media Days. I don't know where the off season went. We always talk about this as being the longest off season in major North American sports. It feels like it's getting shorter and shorter every year.
It is, and I still want to take a few days off, and I'm running out of days to take those because and the weekend before the media days does not count. But yeah, I would like to get a couple of days of just doing nothing, and I'm running out of opportunities. But before we get to there, Tom, we need to do some projecting and some speculating. We do this every year. We talk about which freshmen are going to see the field this year in terms of which freshmen are not going to redshirt, which freshmen are going to redshirt, who's on the fence, that sort of thing. Give people an idea of what we're expecting and what they should expect from people. And if those people then let everybody down, that's not our fault. Again, that's always on the player. Cannot stress this enough. That is on the player. That is on the coaching. Blame the parents if you want as well. It is not our fault. So, Tom, I want to get this started. We're going to go position by position. We'll just group them all together and expedite some things here. So, quarterback, Tavien St. Clair. I think the only two quarterbacks who have not redshirted in the last, 20 years, and since Terrell Pryor, since he was there, it's Braxton Miller and Kyle McCord. And Kyle McCord should have redshirted, played one extra game. It's a lot easier to play now and not redshirt. So I think Tavien St. Clair is redshirting, but as the number 3 quarterback, he's still going to have to get ready to play the game. So I think they want to redshirt him because they want to distance himself. They don't want him and Julian Sain to have the same eligibility, but we'll see how the season goes.
Yeah, I think the fact that he is the third quarterback this year is the only thing that really gives me pause. And he's also physically a lot more developed than some of the other guys who've been in this conversation in the past. But even with that said, I think you're probably going to lean towards redshirting him if you can. If you have a couple injuries and he's the best guy, you're going to play him, and it is what it is. But I would guess they would prefer to play him just in 4 games and get him as many meaningful reps as they can in those 4 games, but not throw him in the closing minutes of a game and burn a year just for that. I think they probably learned a lesson with Kyle McCord on that in 2021. So I will side with history, but say that this is probably a little bit more of a conversation than it would be in most years.
Running back, Ohio State signed 3 running backs: Bo Jackson, Turbo Rogers, Isaiah West. Bo Jackson was here in the spring, so was Isaiah West. Isaiah West was recovering from an injury. Turbo Rogers has since arrived, but was not here for the spring. Tom, I'm going to do it this way. I think Bo Jackson plays, and I think he plays as much or more than James Peoples did last year as a true freshman. I think Isaiah West redshirts, but I think you better keep an eye on Turbo Rogers because Carlos Lachlan really likes him. They're still searching for answers at running back. They're confident in James Peoples, and CJ Donaldson is a veteran. He's certainly not going to redshirt. But I wonder if there's something they like, if there's a role for Turbo Rogers, whether it's a return game or what, where maybe he doesn't redshirt. And then, maybe it becomes a situation where between Turbo Rogers and Isaiah West, you can get 4 games out of each of those guys and they can both redshirt. But I think the easy answer here is Bo Jackson plays. And then sight unseen, I might lean towards Turbo Rogers playing as well.
These shows are always way more fun when we disagree and we can argue about something, but we're not going to do this ESPN style where we force it. And I don't disagree with anything you just said there, which is deeply disheartening to me. But Bo Jackson's not going to redshirt this year if he's healthy. He's going to get plenty of snaps this year. I think they would probably prefer to redshirt the other 2 guys. Again, you're sort of separate. It's 3 running backs in one class, and then you maybe create a little separation. And neither of those guys participating this spring, one because he wasn't here, one because he was hurt. You also got Sam Williams-Dixon on the roster, where if you lose someone or you need to soak up some carries late in games, you have a fourth healthy guy, including Bo Jackson and Donaldson and Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon. So I think they will probably redshirt the other two true freshmen. But you're right. It's we have this conversation with safeties and linebackers a lot where it's, they're probably going to redshirt, except if they're on a kickoff coverage team or they're on a punt coverage team or they're returning kicks or, one of those things. That's how you end up playing the whole season. Then you end up taking more snaps on offense because you're already going to be out there. So I think in order of likelihood, Bo Jackson almost certainly not redshirting unless, he has a health issue or something like that. Turbo Rogers second, just because of the special teams element of it. And then Isaiah West, just because, he was in for the spring, but he didn't actually participate. So he's, in a lot of ways, kind of a summer enrollee, at least in terms of on-field stuff. So that's the order I would have them in as well.
And we've seen CJ Hicks, Arvell Reese, not redshirt, play almost every, play special teams 8 to 14 games or whatever, and not ever see defense and also not redshirt. So there's certainly the possibility. Carlos Lachlan wants his guys involved on special teams, so we'll see how that goes. Tom, I'll let you go. With the receivers, we're talking Quincy Porter, Bodpen Miller, Des Jones, Phillip Bell. How do you see that shaking out? And I'll let you know that if you're right. I know you're tired of agreeing with me. Let's see if I can agree with you.
Well, I think the easy call here is Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter is almost certainly not redshirting. We saw enough from him in the spring that he seems like he's pushing his way into that kind of top 5 conversation. Maybe he's top 4. You have enough snaps there. They're not going to want to play Jeremiah Smith 60 snaps a game. Especially, there's going to be a lot of games where they're not going to play him. They're going to, take him off the field to kind of rest him and protect him. And probably the same for Carnell Tate. So there are going to be snaps there. We saw enough from Quincy Porter. I think he's an easy yes, he's going to play this year to me. The one who's an easy no to me is Bod Miller, who everyone, including Miller himself, recognizes he's coming in as a project. He was a quarterback for his high school team up in Ontario, Ohio. There's no reason to rush him. It's going to take him probably a couple of years of development. They love him just in terms of what he can do physically and what they think he can be ultimately. He's not there yet. Everyone is kind of in universal agreement there. So I think he's probably almost a lock to redshirt this year, just because you're kind of taking a long-term view. The other two guys, they're kind of in the middle to me. Des Jones and Phillip Bell were both in for the spring. We saw enough of them that it was like, okay, you can see what's there, and you can see what the Buckeyes see in them. I think both of them are probably a little more than 50-50 to redshirt, just because you have a decent enough wide receiver rotation that with Jeremiah Smith, with Carnell Tate, with Brandon Innes, with Bryson Rogers, with Mylan Graham, and with Quincy Porter, now you're at 6. And how often do the 7th and 8th wide receivers really get a chance to play meaningful reps? You're not probably going to play, enough to make it worth it for them to see the field in more than 4 games. Maybe one of them's on special teams and you get it that way. But my sense is Quincy Porter, absolutely. Bodpen Miller, almost certainly not. And the other two, probably, I'm leaning towards no, but you could talk me into it, but I'm leaning towards no, just based on numbers and depth there.
And when you say no, you're talking yes, redshirt.
Yes, redshirt. No playing the full season. Yes, redshirt.
And I'm with you. And one of the reasons is Des Jones and Phillip Bell both are in the slot. And so you've already got Brandon Innes there. You've already got Bryson Rogers there. And also they're going to be playing a ton of 12 personnel. So sometimes you're going to have Max Clair there. Sometimes you're going to have Jelani Thurman there. Sometimes you're going to have Max LeBlanc. Like, this is going to be a situation where they've got enough guys that they don't necessarily need to find a third slot receiver because they've got that position covered. So I'm with you. I think those two guys they can get their 4 games, and if they get beyond that, the special teams is always the wild card in this, as you said. But Quincy Porter is only one of the 3 freshmen that I have in my 2 deep, and we'll get to a couple of the others. But yeah, I think he's playing for sure. And then the other 3, they don't need them yet, and there's not a lot of room for a couple of them yet. So in that similar vein, let's move to tight end, which you've got Nate Roberts and Brody Lennon moving to perhaps the deepest position room on the team and one of the deepest position rooms in America. I don't see either of these guys playing more than 4 games in the regular season, and I don't know that we need to go much longer on that one, Tom, but I'll let you.
Yeah, I'm with you on both of them. Brody Lennon coming in the summer, he's one of the easier ones where there's, the tight end in general is a very developmental position. They talk about that all the time. You got to be able to run routes like a Big Ten wide receiver, and you got to be able to block Big Ten defensive ends. And so that's something that generally will take a year or 2 of development. So if you're coming in the summer, that already kind of puts you behind the 8 ball. And even Nate Roberts, as you mentioned, it is such a deep room that there's no real reason to rush him out there. Take your time. You've got Max Clair. You've got Will Kazmarek. You've got Jelani Thurman. You've got Bennett Christian. Yeah, you've got Bennett Christian. You've got all these guys who are proven veteran, 3rd year or older kind of guys. To me, that's a pretty easy decision. If you don't have to rush those guys out there, there's no reason to rush those guys out there. It feels like a conversation we'll probably have about offensive line and some of the defensive linemen as well. There's no real reason to rush them, so I don't think they're going to feel compelled to rush them.
I did really like what I saw from Nate Roberts in the spring. I think he's got the makings of a very good tight end down the road. Just no room or no need for him this year right now. Offensive line, Carter Lowe, Jake Cook, Javon McFadden. I think all 3 are certainly likely to redshirt. I just want to say, keep an eye out for Jake Cook, who was in the 2 deep in the spring at left guard. I think there's a possibility there. Not that they want to burn his red shirt, but if something happens, like things happen in fall camp and things happen throughout the season, he might be one to watch, just because it's been surprising the way he has kind of emerged, or the way he emerged in the spring. I don't expect any of these 3 guys to burn their red shirts to play enough this season. What's your take?
To me, the 2 things I look at with Black Stripe is, were they here in the spring, which if all 3 of these guys were, but also position groups. And offensive line is one where you're almost automatically a redshirt unless you are a Paris Johnson type. And they do have a 5-star Carter Lowe offensive tackle in this class. So, you're Paris Johnson adjacent, let's say. But even so, think about how long it took Paris Johnson to get on the field, and that took a bunch of injuries, and it was mostly late in the season, and he was playing out of position at guard. I think that the depth at offensive line is such now that they're maybe not going to be compelled to throw a true freshman out there. And, putting a Paris Johnson comp on anyone is pretty dangerous and a little irresponsible. And I don't think there's a Paris Johnson level player in this class right now. I can remember Paris Johnson was the number 3 overall pick in the NFL draft. That is a pretty elite company to be in. So I think the safe answer is redshirt on all these guys. But as you said, I think Jake Cook is someone who just keep an eye on him. It might take a year or something, but I think he might be someone who significantly outplays his recruiting rankings in the college level.
Move to defensive end right now with 2, Zion Grady, Epi Sitanale, who arrived in the summer, so he did not get to take part in spring. Zion Grady did. Ohio State has 5 fourth-year defensive ends right now, and that's not including Joshua Mickens and Dominic Kirks, who are a couple of years younger than those guys. Not that either of those guys are proven, so there's certainly room for one of these or both of these guys to get on the field and get into the rotation. I think enrolling in the summer is always going to be the thing that sticks out to me most when you're talking about redshirting, especially on the defensive line. So I'm going to go here, Tom. I could see both of these guys redshirting. I'm going to side with Zion Grady, not but maybe playing like 7 or 8 games. And the thing is, like, if you're going to play him that many games, are you doing it for the playoffs, which is an acceptable reason, where you just want more guys to be ready to go later in the season? So for that reason, I could see Grady not redshirting. Honestly, I could see both of these guys playing and not redshirting, but it's just hard to justify where are you going to put him. So for that reason, I'm going to go Stanley with a redshirt. I think Zion Grady can get enough games in the regular season to be part of maybe not the rotation, but for somebody that they could possibly call on in the playoffs if something goes wrong.
Well, I will agree with you that Grady is more likely to play this year than Satanale. And again, you're coming in the summer, you missed the whole spring, you missed the off-season workouts. You're being asked to play at a Big Ten level, having been on a Big Ten campus for just a couple of months. That's probably, if you are a summer enrollee, it's almost impossible to get on the field enough to make it worth burning your year. So Satanale, I will definitely say redshirt. Grady's an interesting one because there's enough depth there. They're high on him. They like him a lot, but there's enough depth there, especially at the edge, that I don't think they need to do it. So it's really a, do you want to? And I will say slightly more likely than not that they do redshirt him, because remember, you can play 4 games in the regular season and then anything in the postseason doesn't count. So they make the Big Ten championship game. That can be your 5th game. You play 4 college football playoff games. You can play 4 more college football playoff games, and you can play 9 games, and you can still take a red shirt. So I think, he is kind of right on that line for me. I would guess that they wouldn't mind having him redshirt, and just, the depth in that room is going to be, is a little bit of a question. Looking at the 2026 recruiting class, that's sort of where the questions are at the edge position, and they have really been trying to bring in numbers, and they've done a great job in the interior of the defensive line. The edge position still a little bit of a question mark. So, that on one hand means you need him to be ready in 2026, but on the other hand, it means, boy, you wouldn't mind saving a year of eligibility. So, again, this maybe is the toughest question we've had so far. Mm-hmm. I'll say he redshirts, but it's really as close to 50-50 as you can get.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough one. And maybe the answer is for all of the people like, where are the 2026 defensive ends? And it's like, I give you Zion Grady and Epi Satanale as your 2026 defensive ends. Defensive tackle, Jarquez Carter was in the spring. So was Maxwell Roy, but he was dealing with an injury. Or the Trajan Odom was dealing with an injury, and Maxwell Roy was the summer enrollee, correct? Like,
Maxwell Roy, I think, was the one who had a wrestling injury.
Yes,
I think
he was in the summer, and Trajan Odom was, he was fine in the spring. He was here for the spring. But there's some thought that he's more of a developmental guy. So for me, they need guys. They need somebody to play this year. And so somebody's going to play. I think it's going to be Jarquez Carter. He's not the biggest guy, though. He looks pretty small compared to the guys that he's working next to. But that's never stopped Larry Johnson before. And if the guy can play, they'll play him. So I think for me, I'm going Carter will play, Roy and Odom will redshirt and continue their development.
I would agree with that. I think that's exactly what I would have said as well. Carter feels like he's just, a little step ahead of those other guys. He still has some development to do, but you don't have the luxury of the depth on the interior of the defensive line like you do at the edge spots, where, if you can, if you have a choice, you certainly have the luxury of redshirting all of your ends. I don't think you have the luxury of redshirting all of your tackles. They're going to have just bodies on the interior of that defensive line this year. I think Carter's going to have to get thrown into the fire a little bit. I'm sure they would like to redshirt the other guys. That's a spot where you sort of assume they would like to redshirt the guys, because it's another spot where there's just so much physical growth and development that's required to play at the high level, high Big Ten level, national championship, college football playoff kind of level on the interior of those defensive lines. If you're 18 and you're going up against a grown-ass 23-year-old man, that is a tough spot unless you are a real physical freak. And, these guys all have the opportunity to grow into those players, but boy, that's a tough ask for a lot of these true freshmen. So yeah, I will say Jarquez Carter, yes. Roy and Odom, no. But again, maybe one of those guys grows into something later in the season and you can redshirt them, but then take advantage of the postseason loophole there.
Yeah, and you'll see how they move up the depth chart, because if they start moving ahead of the older guys, you got to play them. You can't say, well, we want to redshirt them. You need the best defensive tackles you've got, whether they're freshmen or fourth-year juniors. Linebackers, Tom, Riley Pettyjohn, TJ Alford, Eli Lee. How do you see it shaking out?
These are the guys who you could see all three of these guys playing. I'm sure they would prefer to not have all three of them play and create a little bit of separation there, but these are guys who sort of fit the special teams assassin kind of role. We saw Peyton Pierce, for example, playing a bunch on special teams last year on kick coverage units and that kind of stuff. I think you're going to see at least 1 to 2 of these guys. I'll say Pettyjohn and Alford both play, and Eli Lee redshirts. I don't have a strong feeling there. It's not, I don't think Eli Lee is way behind those other guys or anything like that. It just feels like we maybe saw a little bit more out of Pettyjohn and Alford this spring than Lee. So maybe they're a little bit ahead, maybe, and you probably don't want to play all three of them. So, this is almost a thing where what's the most likely outcome? 2 of these guys play, 1 of these guys plays, 3 of these guys plays, none of these guys play. I mean, that's probably the order I would put it in: 2 and then 1 and then 3 and then 0. But what do you think?
I'm with you on all of those numbers. I think Lee, being the Ohio kid, you can feel better about redshirting him and not upsetting him. Whereas you're talking a Texas and Florida kid, you might just want to keep that in mind. But yeah, I see them on special teams. But Riley Pettyjohn as the number 3 middle linebacker, like, that's not an easy path towards playing time. TJ Alford competing with Garrett Stover to be the number 2 but if you're playing either one of those positions, you basically have to be able to play the other position. So when you look at it, like, there's not a lot of, they're top heavy at linebacker. So there's an opportunity to get into that too deep and play. But I'm with you. I think Pettyjohn and Alford are going to play. I think Lee, redshirts. I think we'll move to corner. This one's pretty easy for me. Devin Sanchez, Jordan Woods. Jordan Woods not here in the spring. They're not super deep at corner, but Devin Sanchez makes them deeper. So I think we all expect Devin Sanchez to play. He'd be a guy where you think he plays every game, and maybe not every game on defense, depending on, like, Jermaine Matthews didn't play on defense against Oregon last year. So to give you an idea, sometimes they're just stuck on, we're keeping the guys that we trust most in the game. So I think Devin Sanchez will play every game. I think Jordan Woods redshirts this year.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the easier conversations. Devin Sanchez went 1st overall in our black stripe draft. Jordan Woods went 25th overall. He's coming in the summer. You're way behind the 8 ball there. Devin Sanchez is pretty clearly in the top 4 already at corner. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for him to play, even if everyone's healthy. So yeah, I think this is a pretty clear yes and no there.
And then safety, Faheem Delane, Deshaun Stewart, Cody Haddad. Stewart's kind of banged up in the spring. Faheem Delane was in the 2 deep. Didn't really see much from Cody Haddad. So I think this one, Tom, go ahead and fill out this one for me, because I think you already know what it's going to be for me.
Yeah, I think you've just did it yourself there. Faheem Delane, yeah, we saw him with the 2s a bunch in the spring. He's another guy who, if you're close enough to the top of the depth chart on defense and you're someone who's a hitter and who can run, you're going to play on special teams. He's going to be someone who you see out on the field. The other 2 guys, as you said, Deshaun Stewart, banged up. Cody Haddad, probably a little more development time needed. So yeah, I think yes on Faheem Delane, and redshirt for the other 2 guys.
I think we pretty much agreed on most of this, but there are some where it's like, yeah, you like defensive end, you're like, where it just depends on how the thing shakes out. So that's the fun of college football. We'll all find out together, even though we did just tell you how all of this is going to go. So remember where you heard it first, of course, as always. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the thumbs up before you go if you're watching on YouTube, and a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcast platform you use would be appreciated. And of course, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up right now, please. Say hello to us there on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.